For almost a decade, many of Star Trek's younger viewers mistakenly thought the show was about cooperation and exploration. The television show is, of course, unique in its genre. Teamwork as depicted on television, however, differed significantly from what actually occurred on set. There was more going on than what you saw on TV when it came to the sabotage, brawls, and feuds. On set, they were taking place. When asked about the events that transpired on the set of Star Trek, Captain Kirk, played by William Shatner, said the following. Because of the high pressure to provide viewers with the best possible television experience, arguments frequently broke out. William Shatner, Captain Kirk, was there for every fierce moment, insult, and brawl. In what ways did William Shatner's meteoric rise to the status of set villain impact Star Trek? In the midst of a record-breaking snowstorm on March 22, 1931, in Montreal, Canada, William Shatner's narrative began. His mother gave birth at home because she was unable to travel to the hospital due to the terrible roads. His life took an unexpected turn right from the start, as if it were predetermined. The acting chops that Shatner displayed at an early age were obvious. A famous Canadian actress ran an acting school, and he enrolled when he was 8 years old. He began his career as an actor when he was just 10 years old. The Magic Flute, a radio program on CBC, was his first acting role. Shortly thereafter, he portrayed Tom Sawyer in a stage production in his hometown, where he received rave reviews for his ageless charisma and self-assurance. At McGill University, Shatner enrolled in the fall of 1948. He was far from an exemplary student. While he may have faltered academically, he truly came into his own on stage. He confessed afterwards that he skipped more classes than he actually attended. He had great success in 1950 with a student play in which he both authored and acted. As a matter of fact, CBC took notice of it on the day when Shatner made his television debut. By 1956, Shatner had made up his mind to take a chance. He packed up and headed to the Big Apple to give acting a go. Even though Tamberlin the Great only ran for 20 performances before shutting, it was a huge break for Shatner, who had never had a chance to star on Broadway before. Not long after leaving Broadway, Shatner made his television debut. He was a major player in the 50s and 60s. Featured in episodes of The Outer Limits, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and The Defenders. That being said, his work on TZ was truly remarkable. In the 1960 episode Nick of Time, he portrayed a guy who was completely absorbed with a fortune-telling device. Next, he played the role of a passenger who was certain an alien is perched on the plane's wing in 1963's Nightmare at 20,000 feet. In these parts, Shatner demonstrated his skill at portraying people whose mental health is deteriorating. The same year, Shatner came close to landing the main role in a completely other television series. In a pilot film on the legendary Conqueror, he played the role of Alexander the Great. Adam West, who would go on to play Batman on television, was also in the ensemble. The pilot depicted Alexander guiding his army into combat against the Persians. However, the network declined to air the show, and it was not until 1968 that it was made available as a television movie. The fate of Shatner's career could have been drastically altered had the series been approved. Star Trek might not have been a part of it. Although Shatner's path to Captain Kirk wasn't easy, he finally achieved it in 1966. A separate captain was in charge of Star Trek in the beginning. In the original pilot, The Cage, Jeffrey Hunter played the role of Captain Pike. NBC said it was too cerebral and sluggish, so they passed. But they did something unusual instead of scrapping the project altogether. An additional pilot was duly ordered. Because of this, Shatner got his shot. While he was in New York, Shatner received a call to view the pilot that had been turned down. He liked the film's production values but felt the performers were being overly serious. Not long after that, Jeffrey Hunter formally stated his intention to concentrate on film and did not return, although Shatner did imply in subsequent episodes that there might have been more going on. When Hunter left, the position of captain became available to Shatner, who quickly made it his own. Williamson hoped that Captain Kirk would be the center of attention. Kirk should not be an overly formal leader, in his opinion. On the contrary, in his mind, he was someone who was full of wonder and adventure, eager to see the world around. Kirk, on the other hand, had to project an air of friendliness, the kind of leader who could say things like, "Hey George, turn left," without being intimidating. Thanks to his charming personality and self-assured demeanor, Kirk became an engaging character that viewers could relate to. Shatner took cues from two sources when developing Kirk's personality. There was Horatio Hornblower, hero of the Navy, courageous and astute. The other was Shatner's portrayal of Alexander the Great, which he had already done in a television production 2 years before. He gave Kirk a dose of Alexander's fearlessness. After realizing the original Star Trek pilot was taking himself too seriously, Shatner decided to inject some humor into the role. Because of this sense of humor, Kirk seemed more relatable. He has the ability to connect with his workers on a deep level through laughter and jokes. Kirk was adored by many because of his blend of charm, intelligence, and physical prowess. Early in the series, in an episode where Kirk's personality split into good and evil sides, Shatner faced one of his greatest hurdles. He had to convey the complexity of Kirk's character by showing both sides of his inner turmoil. One of Spock's classic moves, the Vulcan neck pinch, was invented by Leonard Nimoy, who performed the role during this episode. Shatner and Nimoy frequently collaborated on script rewrites. There were some wonderful moments brought about by their transformations, but there was also tension. Kirk and Spock's lines were reworked while other characters' lines were cut for 14 hours in 1967's The Trouble with Tribbles. The writer, David Gerrold, was angered by this. By the third season, the remaining cast members began to playfully refer to the show as the Shatner-Nimoy Show. The tension, though, wasn't necessarily comical. A violent altercation between Shatner, Nimoy, and the director occurred in 1968 during filming of The Paradise Syndrome. Although Nimoy felt the scene with Kirk's memory loss should be more understated, Shatner insisted that it be intense and dramatic. Production couldn't resume for hours while producer Gene Roddenberry intervened to resolve the dispute. On occasion, Shatner's fiery temper would lead to tensions on set. He felt that Nimoy was receiving an excessive amount of attention when filming The Man Trap in 1966. For the sake of making a point, Shatner purposefully stepped into 17 of Nimoy's camera shots. Nimoy considered leaving the set because of all the retakes that were necessary. On the other hand, there were instances of courageous teamwork. While filming Plato's Stepchildren in 1968, Kirk and Uhura had what is commonly regarded as the first interracial kiss on American television. Shatner was concerned about the potential backlash from viewers and proposed shooting an alternate version without the kiss. Uhura actress Nichelle Nichols, however, thought the kiss was significant. With the purpose of ruining every shot without it, she and Shatner made sure it stayed, forcing the studio to utilize the real kiss. It was a watershed moment in television history. Everyone was exhausted from filming Star Trek. Days would frequently go on for 16 hours or longer. The most challenging was filming the 1967 episode The Doomsday Machine, which required the actors and crew to labor nonstop for 22 hours. The normal start time for Shatner's day was 5:30 in the morning. Applied to cosmetics. Frequently came to a close once the clock struck midnight. Over time, Shatner felt the effects of the many hours spent working on set. After working nonstop for 18 hours on October 3, 1968, he suffered a breakdown on set of The Tholian Web. Out of frustration, he flung his screenplay and insisted on taking a break before continuing. As a result, a new regulation mandating cast rest breaks was put into place. Having said that, the demanding timetable remained unchanged. Star Trek's influence on Shatner's personal life was substantial. Gloria Rand, his first wife, filed for divorce while the series was airing. During his 3 years on set, Shatner missed 217 family dinners, including his daughter Leslie's 5th birthday in 1968, as he confessed in an interview in 2018. Reshooting scenes for The Gamesters of Triskelion even took him away from Christmas Day in 1967. On April 12, 1968, when their daughter Elizabeth had her school performance, Gloria's frustrations reached a boiling point because Shatner had missed it. Due to yet another session of rewriting with Nimoy. In June 1969, not long after the show concluded, Gloria filed for a divorce, claiming that he was emotionally distant and frequently absent. In retrospect, Shatner is sorry he couldn't spend more time with his loved ones. He missed 47 weekends with his kids alone during that time. In 1969, after Star Trek concluded, Shatner's life took a dramatic turn. The show's modest but dedicated fan base wasn't enough to sustain it. Finding acting jobs became difficult for Shatner following the cancellation. He had a hard time landing parts since people couldn't picture him in anything other than Captain Kirk. He was compared to Marlon Brando and other budding stars just a few years ago. He was now unemployed and uncertain about his future. problems started to get worse in the early 1970s. Shatner had no choice but to accept whatever parts that came his way. No matter how small the budget, his career would have benefited from them. He was in several films, including Kingdom of the Spiders, The Devil's Reign, and Big Bad Mama. He required the money, even though these weren't the positions he desired. The typecasting that had dogged him since Star Trek became even more apparent when people began to view him solely as an actor who had acted in science fiction and horror films. He had a hard time making ends meet, and his 3 daughters, who were living with their mother in Beverly Hills, were struggling as a result. Due to his severe financial hardship, Shatner took up residence in a San Fernando Valley camper. The difficulty of discussing this time in his life led him to refer to it simply as that period in subsequent writings. The once famous actor was now living on the streets, scraping by. No matter how demeaning the job, Shatner would accept it. In an effort to make ends meet, he would make cameo appearances at modest gatherings. When he was strapped for cash one Christmas, he made do with wrapping up things he already had rather than buy presents for his daughters. As a present, much like his Star Trek phaser, Shatner persevered through the difficult and humiliating period. After that, in 1979, a sea change occurred. Shatner reprised his role as Captain Kirk when Star Trek was resurrected as a film. It was one of the most costly movies ever filmed at the time, with a budget of $35 million. After Star Wars became a huge success in 1977, Paramount opted to make a film based on the franchise rather than a new Star Trek TV show. Although he was hesitant to return at first, Shatner ultimately decided to do so after receiving a large salary and having some say over the screenplay. Strict nutrition and exercise helped him shed 25 pounds at the age of 48, when he made a concerted effort to become in shape. Nevertheless, filming was not a picnic. Script revisions occurred frequently, sometimes even while filming. The director and authors and Shatner frequently had disagreements, pushing for plans like Kirk's risky space jump. The idea was almost included in the finished picture, but it was cut out for financial and safety reasons. The motion picture, Star Trek, aired in December 1979 to much fanfare despite the setbacks. Many felt that Shatner brought a new level of maturity to the role of Captain Kirk while remaining faithful to the original. Worldwide, the picture earned $139 million, which is respectable but not spectacular. Despite having a smaller budget than its predecessor, 1982's Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan was a huge hit, grossing $95.8 million, and often considered to be the greatest in the franchise. From 1979 to 2016, 13 films were produced under the Star Trek franchise, which expanded into a massive industry. Iconic words like "live long and prosper" and "beam me up, Scotty" became part of everyday life, influencing real-world technology and popular culture beyond just ticket sales. Nevertheless, significant obstacles were introduced in 1989 with Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. Shatner, the film's director, hoped that the Enterprise crew would go on a spiritual quest. Changes were imposed on him since the studio was against his vision. Shatner later acknowledged that he was unprepared for the magnitude of the endeavor, seeing it as a failure that haunted him for many years. The issues with the film started early on. Due to budget constraints, Shatner's spectacular conclusion featuring gigantic rock creatures was deleted. The spectacular effects weren't up to par with previous films, so the movie fell flat. Also, on set, there were difficulties, especially between Leonard Nimoy and Shatner, because Shatner felt that Spock was too famous. The film was a huge failure, earning just $63 million globally against a production budget of $33 million. With his role as a stern sergeant in the 1982 police drama T.J. Hooker, Shatner's career took a surprising turn. Despite Shatner's initial 3 rejections, he finally decided to star after the show's creator tailored the pilot to his preferences. As the show gained popularity, it attracted as many as 20 million viewers weekly. One of the reasons the show was so popular was because Shatner was so committed to being himself, even doing his own stunts. A concussion and a broken rib were among his many injuries. Shatner was a mentor to Heather Locklear, whose career took off after her introduction to the program in season 2. John T. The popularity of Hooker spawned several media adaptations, including comic books, board games, and action figures. In 1997, Shatner stepped into a whole new role as the spokesperson for Priceline.com. Although the deal was only supposed to last 6 weeks, Shatner's eccentric character, the negotiator, became an instant hit. For 22 years, Shatner was associated with Priceline. He apparently received $600 million worth of shares when he chose it over cash at one point. It bolstered Shatner's reputation for commercial acumen, even though he has never said whether or not he sold his shares. The humorous Priceline advertisements gained a lot of fame, in which a dream of Shatner's served as inspiration for an ad that shocked viewers in 2012 by having his character die in a bus explosion. Playing Denny Crane on Boston Legal from 2004 to 2008 was a huge return to television for Shatner. Although he was hesitant at first, the show's creator eventually persuaded Shatner to accept the part since it was perfect for him. It was Denny Crane's quirks and catchphrase that made him a larger-than-life figure. The writers intentionally allowed room in the screenplay for Shatner to improvise, which led to his delivering many of the character's funniest moments. Denny Crane and Alan Shore's, James Spader, friendship was a major factor in the show's popularity. Their late-night balcony chats while smoking scotch and cigars became iconic. Acting was just the beginning of Shatner's creative path. In 1968, he launched his musical career with the bizarre album The Transformed Man record of spoken word that became beloved by a small group of people. Has Been, his 2004 album produced by Ben Folds, had genuine musical depth, shocking critics. Shatner even gave a live performance of the single Common People, which became an unexpected smash, at the Glastonbury Festival when he was 74 years old. The Tech War series, which Shatner authored and which spawned a television series, comics, and a computer game, was among his more than 30 books. While I'm working on this, he interviewed scientists like Stephen Hawking to investigate the link between science fiction and reality. A moving book detailing his connection with Leonard Nimoy, Leonard was published in 2016 by Shatner. Their strong friendship and the truth of their breakup just before Nimoy passed away were both disclosed in the book, which moved many readers. The 90-year-old Shatner is still going strong. He put out The Blues in 2020, on an album that has guest appearances by famous artists. Boldly Go, Reflections on a Life of Awe and Wonder, his autobiography published in 2022, provided insight into his life and career. It recounted his 2021 space expedition with Blue Origin, demonstrating that Shatner continues to venture into uncharted territory in his personal and professional life. Like his acting careers, Shatner's personal life has been full of twists and turns. They were married in 1956, when he was just starting out as an actor, and they had 3 kids. Unfortunately, his marriage started to crumble as his life was captivated by Star Trek's popularity. Just 1 year before the show ended, in 1969, they got a divorce. They tied the knot in 1973, and since then, he and Marcy Lafferty have been involved in the horse breeding industry as partners. Their love for horses endured until their 1996 divorce. Noreen Kidd was Shatner's 3rd wife in 1997. Unfortunately, despite the love, it was devastating. Despite Shatner's best efforts, Noreen sadly drowned in their pool in 1999 while under the influence of alcohol and Valium. Shatner came to honor her by establishing a foundation that assists women battling addiction. They appeared to have a healthy relationship for nearly 20 years when Shatner wed Elizabeth Martin in 2001. They separated in 2020, but they got back together and were together inseparable by 2024. Elizabeth was the lifeblood of the relationship, according to Shatner, and they had learned from each other's faults and were now able to support one another. In spite of his troubled marriage history, Shatner has maintained strong relationships with his kids, who recall him fondly as a father who was always there for them. In the same vein as their father, all 3 of his daughters have made cameo appearances in Star Trek-related media. As a grandfather, Shatner finds immense fulfillment in spending time with his grandkids and reminiscing with them, while creating cherished experiences. Despite the ups and downs, William Shatner's life remains an inspiration for perseverance. He shows that it's possible to begin anew at any age by embracing love and family at 93 years of age.